Good afternoon. Oops, sorry, it's a little bit loud. Welcome to the National Press Club. We are so delighted to have so many of you here in the room with us for our luncheon with U.S. Marine Corps Commandant General David Berger. Our formal program will begin in a little less than 2 minutes, but before we get started, I wanted to go over a couple housekeeping items. As you know, we're often carried live on C-SPAN, so now is a good time to turn off your cell phone ringers. You also find cards in the middle of your table. These ones. Please feel free to write your questions on those and pass those up to the head table. Make sure that I can't read them if they're not legible, though, so please take the time to be very clear. I will ask as many questions as time permits, but I can't ask what I can't read. So once again, print legibly. Thanks again, and we'll start in about 30 seconds. Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Eileen O'Reilly, the 2023 president of the National Press Club and managing editor of Axios in charge of our standards and training. Thank you for joining us, both here and online, for our headliner event with U.S. Marine Corps Commandant General David H. Berger. We are happy to accept your questions, and after General Berger's opening remarks, I'll ask as many as time permits. To submit a question online, please email headliners@press.org and put Marines in the subject line. It is now my pleasure to introduce this distinguished head table. Please stand when your name is called. Starting on my right, Tom Young, commander of the National Press Club, American Legion Post. Kevin Wensing, retired U.S. Navy captain and National Press Club member who helped organize today's event. We'll get to the speaker in a moment. Lori Russo, president of Stanton Communications and co-chair of the headliners team, which organized this event. And to my left, Max Lederer, publisher of Stars and Stripes. Oops, sorry. No. Carrie O'Reilly, senior managing editor of emerging markets of Sightline Media Group. Caitlin Kenny, staff reporter for Defense One. And Donna Laiwand Leger, president and founder of DC Media Strategies, co-chair of the headliners team, and the 2009 president of the National Press Club. Wow. Thank you all for being here. So 3 years ago, U.S. Marine Corps Commandant David H. Berger announced Force Design 2030, a plan to transform the Marine Corps to face growing threats from longtime adversaries, Russia and China. The emergence of these two power competitors coincided, he noted, with a sea change in the character of warfare, driven by social and technological advancements. The situation, he wrote, demands that we move rapidly to adapt to the circumstances of a new era. This radical revamp, as characterized by foreign policy analyst Max Boot, is meant to realign the Corps' focus toward amphibious operations in the Pacific and elsewhere, rather than land-based insurgencies based in the Middle East. Some of the changes included getting rid of tanks, cutting the number of artillery batteries, investing in drones, electronic warfare, and tactical missiles, and creating an entirely new regiment purpose-built for Pacific Island warfare. The plan did not go down easily. More than 24 retired generals publicly criticized it. Retired Marine generals Charles Krulak, Jack Sheehan, and Anthony Zinni, in a Washington Post op-ed, called it well-intended but wrong. In an interview with Boot, General Berger said he welcomed the dissent, saying that should be the kind of family discussion about what direction we're taking. Now, many of these plans are beginning to take shape. Earlier this month, General Berger observed as his newly created regiment meant to fight island battles trained during an exercise in California. We are eager to hear more from the general about how his plan is progressing and what he has learned along the way. Please join me in giving a warm National Press Club welcome to the 38th Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, General David H. Berger.
I had no idea they were going to leave a weapon up here for me. I'm going to put it up here, Eileen, so I don't make a mistake. Thank you, first of all, for a great introduction and a great meal. I have never, I don't think in my life, seen a cookie with a Marine Corps emblem on the top of it. The bar, I mean, right there, it's pretty impressive. And if you put food in front of a Marine, of course, we're gonna eat it all. Thank you to the people also in the press club, because I think the legacy, the traditions that you carry on mean a lot, really does, especially to Marines. If you paid any attention on Sunday, you would have followed the selection for the NCAA tournament and Marquette in the tournament. Friday plays Vermont. So if today, I think the games start today or tomorrow, so not that there's any gambling involved, but if you haven't filled out your bracket yet, I would fill out your bracket. Marines do their homework, of course, and after I got the invitation, but before today I did mine, and I learned at the press club the history of it, because it's online. What I didn't know is that it actually started as a bar, which is so super impressive to a Marine. It was a place, of course, where they could gather and play cards, which I equate to gambling, and it was a bar. So for someone who represents an organization, the Marine Corps, that was founded in a bar, in a tavern in Philadelphia, because that's where the first Marines were recruited from, to one leader of an organization that was founded as a bar. I think it's kind of funny, but really I think we both come a very long way. I think it also demonstrates, both of those, that despite all the changes that happen around the world and to our institutions over time, there are actually some basic principles that your organization and ours that we're founded on that they don't change. A couple of weeks ago, you all were kind enough to ask my boss, the Secretary of the Navy, to speak here. And he talked at length about the merits, the value of a free and open press. And of course, those of us serving in uniform could not agree more. And I think that the articles, when you walk in here, you all know them, but I had never seen them before. The articles and the pictures that are on the walls here, they are sort of, to somebody like me, a real testament to the difference that free press can make. Our competitors around the world, and you know who they are, I think they know the value of the press also. Why else, of course, would they spend all of their efforts trying to squash it, right? Trying to choke it off, trying to limit it and censor it, and really just basically eradicate free and open flow of information, which you work so hard to keep. I think you watched last year the coverage of Russia's buildup of forces inside Russia and then their subsequent invasion of Ukraine. Other side of the world, to the PRC, the People's Republic of China, their continued economic and political kind of coercion of all the partners that we have in the Pacific. The great part about the press, in other words, is that you shine a giant light like a mag light on all that malign activity, that I think if you didn't, it might go unnoticed. But it's so important that in foreign policy circles and elsewhere, we see it. And as we have seen, I think time and time again, information itself has the power to unite and mobilize otherwise disparate peoples for the collective defense of a democratic world. Your and my access to information, the widespread and ubiquitous availability of everything from satellite imagery all the way down to what's on her phone, all of that information all the time. That's impacted both of our professions, I would offer to you, in a really profound and resounding way. It is so important to us in the military that the joint force, your military, actually lifted up, elevated information to be a function by itself, just like intelligence and logistics. That's kind of military code for all the stuff we have to do, which shouldn't surprise you, right? Except that we didn't do that until 2017. Now, we knew for a long time the power of information. So why did it take us until 2017? Seems kind of late, right? To figure out that information is going to be a powerful part of what we have to do in the military. We knew it was important. But I think it's also a great example of the dichotomy between the pace of change and the pace of the Pentagon. It's not a secret that the pace of change, in my view, is not linear. It is on a curve. It's accelerating. And not just in the information space, but really in every aspect of military operations. But I actually don't think that's the problem. It's not the problem at all. The problem is that we're still clinging to a culture to try to keep pace with a slower rate that we were more comfortable with. Our ability to do it quickly, in other words, to absorb information and move it, has never been more important than now. And the nature and the capability of our competitors, I would say, without overstating it, and I don't think it's hyperbolic, this is a generational window we're in right now. And the progress that we make right now as a nation, I think, informs the coming decades. But this is a good news story. If you look at the Department of Defense today, you're going to find that the Navy and the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps and the Space Force, we understand that challenge. And we are making real progress towards modernizing our forces, like Eileen said. And really, in some areas where we already have a lead over our competitors, extending that lead. We're all making changes in the way that helps us operate and prepare for the future, all of which you would expect. But I don't really think you invited me here to talk about the other services. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to focus a little bit on the Marine Corps. And typically, for me, the first set of questions in a group like this is, why does the Marine Corps need to change? Why is this whole force design thing happening now? Is the Marine Corps broke? Are you guys okay? And I start by saying that I completely agree with those that say the Marine Corps is not broke. It's absolutely not. In a lot of ways, the Marine Corps today that you see in uniform out there is at the top of their game. They are the most capable, the most fit, the most intelligent, aggressive, driving Marines you've ever seen, and the best that I have ever served alongside. But that in no way frees us up for the responsibility to prepare for the future. We cannot rest on our laurels. And I'm sure that the history buffs here in the audience, and I know there's one or two, you probably would agree with me that one of the enduring kind of natures of the Marine Corps is that we are used to change. An enduring tradition of the Marine Corps is change, because we have an obligation to our country to win whatever conflict we're put up in, we face. Or as we say in the Marine Corps, we have to adapt and overcome. That's what we do. World War II, it was amphibious operations. Korea, it was helicopter-borne operations. Desert Storm, where I started, maneuver warfare. And then came Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was counterinsurgency. And the Marines have always met those challenges head on. And you would expect us to do that. So when General Neller, who was my predecessor as the previous commandant, when he testified before Congress and said that the Marine Corps is not organized, trained, and equipped for the future, for what the strategy was calling for, of course, Marines, we jumped on that opportunity to do what we do best, adapt. And that, Eileen, is what force design is all about. It's an opportunity. This is our opportunity to challenge all of the assumptions, to divest of things, to get rid of things that were useful in the past, in previous battles, in previous conflict, but not so applicable in the future. And in the end, it's an opportunity to make the Marine Corps into the most capable force this nation can imagine, of winning against the toughest adversary out there that we could envision. So that was our approach. That's with that mentality in place, we started to design the force for the future that was aligned to the 2018 National Defense Strategy. Something that would meet the needs of the what we call combatant commanders, the regional commanders around the world. And something that gets us back closer to our maritime roots, our nature, and the statutory responsibilities written into law as America's force in readiness. That's what your Marine Corps is. So in this age of ubiquitous kind of sensing everywhere and long-range precision fires and counter-intervention technologies and cyber and space and information, all that, we knew we had our work cut out for us. But we also knew that Marines, your Marines, are capable of anything. All we need to do is enable them. All we need to do is let them go, and they will figure it out. And I got to tell you, standing here, there are no words to describe how proud, how impressed I am with the speed at which Marines are moving forward. I know, of course, because I am one. I have sons who are the Marines. I know what we're capable of. And you're still impressed when you go out to the field and you see what they're doing and the speed that they're doing, how fast they're moving. And I would invite all of you all to go out and see your Marines too. John Ismay traveled with me a few weeks ago to go out to California for a few days to watch a training exercise. He'd never been to one before. You should ask him. I think he would tell you if he was sitting here that he saw and listened to and talked with Marines who are taking things that were just ideas a year ago and doing them right now. They're not waiting at all. They're turning them into reality. And they're producing capabilities that can give us a war-fighting, full-up-around capability now, not 10 years from now, not in 2030. So I'm really proud of all the work, you would be too, of all the work that Marines are doing to turn this notion of a modernized force, this force design, into reality now, today. But force design for us will never be done. It'll never be over because we are continuously experimenting. The world is changing. We are iterating with it. Our focus is to make sure Marines understand that failing, trying something differently, and if it didn't work out, that's not the same as failure. It's learning. And it's okay. It's what we should be doing. I think that's what you want us to do. And it's making them more comfortable out on the edge with trying things in different ways. Much better than somebody sitting back in the Pentagon could ever dream of. Basically, our laboratory, where we learn, is out there in the field, in the fleet. And the results of all of that experimentation are fed back in to Quantico, Virginia. And last year, as Eileen pointed out, we created a Marine Littoral Regiment, custom built for what it needs to do in the Pacific. That organization is going to bring all the surveillance and fires and intelligence and everything else right to where it's needed at the forward edge. And right next to all of our allies and partners, like we were talking the Philippines and Japan and Australia and all of our close partners. You would expect all of us to be forward. That's where Marines do our best work, both aboard amphibious ships and ashore. And that's the best chance this nation has to prevent a conflict. That's how deterrence works, and it's 24/7. The infantry in the Marine Corps, that's going to remain the centerpiece. That's not going to change. But they're going to have access to capabilities and resources that used to be several levels above them, now brought down to the lower tactical levels. The laundry list of things that we are not just experimenting with, but actually fielding right now, from loitering munitions all the way down at the squad level. Anti-air capabilities that marry up a radar and a missile system, and it's all autonomous. We can sense and make sense of the environment at much greater ranges and much greater speeds than we could before. And those Marines are going to augment themselves with electronic warfare and signals intelligence and high-end command and control capabilities, all of that so that they can be more effective in a fight. They can also connect with air support. We have F-35s, fifth-generation aircraft. We have MV-22 Ospreys. We have the best aircraft in the world. And that's a long list, of course, of investments in equipment and platforms, systems. But the most important thing that the Marine Corps is invested in is Marines. We fundamentally understand, more than anything else, it's the individual Marine that makes the difference between winning and losing. It's not a piece of gear. It's not a plane. Those Marines' training, their education has to be commensurate, though, with the level of individual skill and competency and decision-making and leadership that we think is going to be required in the future. We will spread out. We will operate very dispersed. And that puts a premium on individual action when you're very spread out. Not from colonels and lieutenant colonels, but from corporals and sergeants and lieutenants. So in that spirit, we took a really critical look at the training and education in the Marine Corps. How are we preparing those Marines? And with a whole lot of humility, we recognized that we could make it a whole lot better. This year, we published our guidelines for the future of training and education in the Marine Corps, built from a desire to mature the force that we have by giving them more reps, more sets, more realism when it comes to training. And we are leveraging technologies that we didn't even have 5 or 6 years ago to combine live and virtual and constructive all in the same training environment. And hardest of all, you give Marines the chance to fight against the most difficult adversary they can imagine, another Marine unit. This is force-on-force training. And it doesn't take, of course, strategic genius to figure out that the mastery of all that technology and skills and multiple skill sets in some instances, all that's expanded dramatically. And it's not better or worse than when I was a younger officer. It's just different. But we have to change the way we look at training. Because I frankly don't think the old model that I grew up in, how I was trained, I don't think that gives enough credit to today's Marines. They learn faster. They learn in a different way, and we have to match that. So as we adjust how we train and educate Marines, we also need to reevaluate their careers, how we manage people. We can no longer view Marines as inventory, which is how we historically have, kind of an industrial model. And that model that we had in the Marine Corps since the end of the Vietnam conflict basically said we're going to replace all these Marines at the end of their 4 years with a whole new batch of new ones. And it worked for 50 years, arguably, really effective Marine Corps. But going forward, I think we must prioritize quality over quantity. And we owe it to them to try to keep them around at the end of their 4 years. And honestly, I think we owe it to the taxpayer to do the same. Just when they get to the point where they're trained and they're leaders and they have the experience, we can't show them the back door. We can't train them, deploy them, thank you for your service, and then ask them to leave. And we're already seeing dividends. Last year, retention for us, retention is what happens at the end of your contract, your 4-year contract. Last year, way exceeded our goals. This year, 50% better than last year. Marines are staying in the Marine Corps. They are staying Marine. But changing our manpower model, our HR sort of model, is more than that. We also have to modernize our IT structure, our information technology structure. We have to expand personal agency. We got to change the way we see career progression and the relationship between our active duty Marines and the Reserve Marine Corps. Other people have said it more accurately, but I think sometimes the hardest part of change, I have discovered, Eileen, in the last 4 years, the hardest part of change is not actually grabbing a hold of a new idea, embracing a new idea. It's letting go of the old. People like me have built their entire 40-year careers to dedicating learning and our approach to warfare in a certain way. But sometimes, because of that, we have a real visceral reaction to letting go of it. We got to be willing to do that. But fortunately for people like me, there's a lot of things in the Marine Corps that do not change, will not change. The first of them is our warrior ethos as Marines. I would tell you the character of war may change, and it is, but the character of a Marine is unchanging. Our core values of honor and courage and commitment, they will endure regardless of the changes in the world around us. Every Marine always has been, always will be a rifleman. And our organization as a Marine Air and Ground Task Force, that will endure. The way we make Marines at Parris Island and San Diego and Quantico will not change. Even if we look at things like lateral entry, which we are, pathways for certain critical skills, every single Marine will earn the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor in the same way. They will earn that title. They will make the transformation. And then, after that, they'll have to live up to the ideals that it represents. We will remain the nation's force in readiness. We are our nation's premier crisis response force. And we will always, always be ready to deploy. We will be the most ready to fight and the most ready to win. Our ships, our amphibious ships, like the LPD Flight 2, which doesn't mean anything to a lot of you all, and future generations of amphibious ships, all that's going to continue to make sure that your Marines can be at the forward edge all the time, wherever, whenever we're needed. And this responsibility, I think, to our nation doesn't just require a ready force, it requires ready Marines. So the standards, the discipline, the unwavering dedication to mission above self, that's not going to change. That will always define the individual Marine. It's reflected in how we train. It's reflected in how Marines fight, how we see ourselves and how the rest of the world sees us. And there is nothing on this earth like a U.S. Marine. Lastly, the Marine Corps will remain foundationally underpinned by our non-commissioned officers. They are the backbone of the Marine Corps. Our continued success depends on them, directly connected to the quality of our NCOs, non-commissioned officers. If you look at the war in Ukraine, you can see it in spades. Why the Ukrainian armed forces is able to hold on? NCOs, lower unit tactical leaders who are very well trained, and they're given the freedom to make decisions. They make the difference in the U.S. Marine Corps, today and for generations to come. 247 years you have had a Marine Corps. And in places like Bellewood and Iwo Jima and Chosin and Hue, all those are etched into the history of this nation. And you should leave here this lunch today being very confident that they will be there when another name is added to that list. And I think you all will write those headlines, frankly. Some people describe the world today as uncertain and chaotic and turbulent. And I think probably okay. You know, we wouldn't be surprised if most people wake up in the morning and think, wow, the world is in trouble. It's really going off the rails. But to Marines, this sounds like our job description. For Marines, this sounds more like what we do for the nation. Because right now, this afternoon, while we're having great lunch here, as of this morning, there were a little more than 32,000 Marines deployed forward on ships and ashore in more than 50 countries doing what you need them to do. That's how we secure the world for this country. That's how they preserve the peace. Everywhere from Europe to the Pacific, from Africa to the Middle East, you will find Marines. And if you listen to any of the commanders out there, the admirals and generals who command all those forces out there in the field, the one common refrain you'll hear is, I need more Marines. Give me more Marines. And every time our response is, we are ready. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here this morning. I'd love to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions, so thank you for being open for them.
Ready to go.
So first, I thought we'd talk about the Force Design 2030.
Sure.
It's been 3 years since you announced it. Can you tell us, what you see working so far?
Yeah. I wouldn't focus here on a piece of equipment or a weapon system. What's working the best is unleashing the creativity, kind of the innovative spirit. You work with them, you see them around all the time. Younger Marines, if you just let them go without micromanaging and tell them, here's the problem, go figure it out, and you allow them to try things, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. That's the biggest thing, I think, is the creative, innovative spirit of younger Marines. Now, the magic of it, to make it work, though, they can't just learn things and it ends there. It has to be brought back into the Marine Corps and then made into something. And that's my job. That's our job. But the experimentation, the trial and error is happening at such a fast rate. And it's that aggressiveness, that willingness to try something. It's the same spirit that you need in a battle. It's the same. It's remarkable. So I think it's nothing that I'm doing individually. It's just unleashing potential that we already knew was there, but just creating an environment where they can try something a different way.
How do you respond to the naysayers? Even just as recently as December 2022, two retired generals, Terrence Dake and Charles Wilhelm, said that the plan is putting the U.S. at risk. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. One of the things you learn when you don't really understand it till you become a service chief, a commandant, is I get up in the morning and I read for an hour and a half, because I have all the classified networks at home. Then I go work out, then I get something to eat, and I go into work, and I get the daily briefing. That's all the intelligence and all the operational information at obviously the most highest classification levels. And then you spend weeks in traveling to understand where technology is right now, where it's going. So all of that you get every single day when you're the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And when I retire in July, the next day I'll get 0 of that. So I am making decisions based on all of the great information that they had when they were serving. So I don't respond in a negative way. I think they care passionately about the Marine Corps. They want me to make the best decisions, which we are. They should trust, of course, that it's being informed by so much testing and war games and experimentation and an understanding of where technology is. All that underpins the decisions that I have the privilege to make, and they made when they were serving too. So I don't disparage them at all. They love the Marine Corps. They care about the Marine Corps.
Can you tell us a little bit about what technology you're talking about that has informed these changes?
Yeah. I think in a couple ways, maybe I'll take two or three. One, sometimes it's not new technology, but taking two or three existing technologies and the magic of it, trying to find a way to marry them together. For example, we have developed a system that's designed to find and, if necessary, to sink a ship, right? A new kind of a capability for us. But here's the ingenuity of it. It's taking a vehicle that we currently have, cut the top off of it, make it autonomous, put a missile launcher on the back, and marry it up to another radar system that we already have. And the IT to tie all that together, to fuse it all together. So in some instances, it's taking existing things, but challenging industry to fuse them together. In other cases, it's things like artificial intelligence that allow us to make decisions faster. They don't replace the human being, but they allow us to filter out all the distractors and get it. If you have to make a tactical decision, allow you to get at the crux of the problem very quickly. So in every area, from things that fly to unmanned vessels, unmanned vehicles, autonomous systems, all that is going at such a fast rate ahead. I'm going to illustrate for you. Okay?
Of course, yeah.
Here's how the Marine Corps that I grew up in, if they invented this phone, right? First, it would take like 11 years, but let's just say it's done. Okay, so the phone is done. And what would happen is the Marine Corps would form a team of trainers from wherever to bring me the phone to my unit, and they would bring 3 or 4 of these phones, and they would teach us how to use these phones. And it would take a week long of training so that we could understand the new phone. And then we would go out and start using the phone. And that's how we did business, right? You know where I'm going with this, right? If I did that today to a young Marine, what would he do with his phone? First, he would do illegal things like reprogram it, right? And he would fall asleep in the classes because he already YouTubed it. So he would just take that phone, and then him and a couple friends that night would reprogram it and find like 7 things it was not designed to do. And then by Friday, they would tell me, well, you know, those rules that you had for the phone, 2 of them, they're worthless. But we came up with these 3 others, and we kind of violated the warranty and all that, but it's great because it really works great. I mean, that's how we have to embrace that, not fight it.
I love that.
Those of you all had kids, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, totally. Speaking of phones, I was wondering if that might change a little bit as we learned from the Ukraine-Russia conflict
yes.
about how they're being used to target people.
This is how you're located today on the battlefield. And it can be passive. You can think it's turned off, I'm not talking, I'm not texting. This is how you're located today. This is how Ukraine is tracking Russian people today. This is so difficult, though, because you and my kids, they grew up, they were born with these things, right? You and I we bought them for them when they were 10 years old and sent them to school with them. So it's unnatural for them not to have them on, not to have them with them. But that's exactly how Ukrainian forces are finding the Russian troops right now. Absolutely, yes.
So do you think that will change the policy, or is this something we're still thinking about?
We already have the policy. You cannot take your phone to the field.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay.
Can't take it to the field because we know that's how you be tracked.
Okay. So with the new regiment, please provide an update on the infantry battalion experiment and next steps this year.
Yeah. We had 2 choices. As fast as I felt we needed to learn, we could either create an experimental unit and then play around with it for a year or 2 and learn what we could and feed back into the Marine Corps, or we could use the Marine Corps as our laboratory. We chose B. There is no experimental unit in the Marine Corps. So in the case of infantry battalions, this is the core of our corps, infantry. So what we did is we have 3 Marine divisions in the Marine Corps on the active duty side. So we picked 1 battalion from your division and your division and your division. Each of you organized differently, trained differently, equipped differently. And for 18 months, you were on a regular workup training cycle, and then you deployed, and you deployed, and you deployed your battalion. And all of that in 18 months, we could learn 3 times as much as we could with a single experimental unit. And it was much more realistic because you're actually deploying. It's not a make-believe unit. They're actually going overseas for 6 months. So we took all of that, and in a nutshell, to finish the story, we thought, today, the infantry battalion that I grew up in was about 880 Marines. Pretty big. So we thought we can make it a lot smaller with all this extra capability. Let's try to, I think maybe around 730 or 40 maybe. Well, it turns out from these 3 units, it's not 890 and it's not 740, it's about 811. That's how we learn fast. We use the world as our laboratory, real units to give us feedback, and then we have to listen and make those adjustments, which we're doing.
In light of the distances in the Pacific, what are your concerns about the availability of logistics support for rapid replenishment and movement of troops?
Now, there are basic functions in warfare, intelligence and fires and command and control. And they garner a lot of people's attention because they're cool to talk about, and they're weapon systems and jets and planes and or ships. They're all kind of, it's cool stuff to look at and you can feel them. What's not so cool to talk about logistics. But if you were trying to counter the United States right now militarily, I think you would go after our logistics. We're not overconfident, but frankly, since World War II, no one has challenged our logistics. And there's a logistician, a professional logistician sitting right here. We have had a secure backside since World War II. We really didn't have to worry about that at all. Going forward, we all understand we will be contested. We call it contested there. Absolutely yes. When 2 near peer or peer forces go at each other, they rarely do it symmetrically because that would just turn into like a slugfest. So if it's my force against his, I'm going to try to find his weaknesses. He's going to try to find mine. We have a long way to go on logistics. We're okay today, but I imagine she's a logistician. I would imagine we have to catch up. How we supply our forces, how we move those forces, how we sustain those forces, because we had 50 years where it wasn't challenged by anybody, and now it is. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but you should probably get up here and tell them. This is your whole life. I mean, do you agree? Is logistics a challenge?
It is contested, sir, and it is something we look at as we pre-position across the nation in our ally partners.
Yeah. We weren't lazy. We just didn't need to worry about it. Now we do.
Is that something the pandemic helped kind of teach?
In what way? What do you mean?
As far as it seemed to inform a lot of different parts of our industry and our nation and supply chain issues.
Supply chain, yeah. I think yes. And this is another great example of just being willing to learn. You know where I've learned the most about logistics, global logistics in the past 3 years? FedEx. Whose CEO just happens to be a Marine, Fred Smith. I'm serious. I mean, you and I are laughing. Of course we are. But FedEx knows how to do global logistics. So we have gone down to Tennessee several times in the past couple of years to listen, to ask questions, because they have solved global logistics in a contested environment, not because people are shooting at them, but hurricanes and typhoons and political things that shut down this country and open up that one. So we are learning from companies like FedEx, and we should.
The Littoral Regiment is a departure from other fighting units with just 1 infantry battalion instead of 3, a logistics group, as you said,
Yeah.
and an anti-aircraft battalion. Why this particular formation?
Yeah. Before we started into the things and the organizations that you're talking about. We had to figure out how we're going to operate. What does the Marine Corps do for the military going forward? And if you had to boil it all down, we learned probably something that surprised a lot, not probably, it surprised a lot of us. The value, part of the value of the Marine Corps when they're very far forward is their ability to sense what is in front of them and the rest of the force and try to prevent the adversary from doing the same against us and the rest of our force. Then, if you need to, bring in the fires, be lethal. But the first part, can you collect, can you surveil, can you collect against what the other side is doing all the time and make it really difficult? This organization, the first one, established in Hawaii, is custom built to do that. It doesn't need 3 battalions because what it needs is the ability to survive by itself, very spread out, sense what's in front of them, report all of that back, and if need be, bring in the fires on the target if that's the mission. They are custom built for that. Now, this is the first one. I think over the next couple of years, we will create another one, but we'll learn from both, and we'll probably make adjustments because at the speed we're making, we don't have to get to 100% up front. What we have to do is move. So I think our thinking is probably it's a 80-85% solution. We'll make adjustments as we go, but it's custom built to deter, to confront, to do what you all do, basically illuminate all the bad things that PRC are doing in the South China Sea and tell the world and make sure that the commander in Hawaii knows exactly what's happening in front of him. It's built for that.
Have you already made adjustments, or you're still considering those?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Ismay went out with us to California. We saw that regiment that you're talking about. They were in California. This was their first major exercise. They were making adjustments while we were out there from where they had begun. So in stride, like in the span of 2 weeks, they're fine-tuning how they're operating, which is exactly what you want them to do. Big adjustments, not yet. But at the colonel who commands it, he is not waiting. As he saw changes, minor adjustments he needed to make, he is tuning that organization on the fly. Adapt and overcome, right? That's what we do.
That's a great motto. What lessons learned is that USMC taking from the recent exercises with the 3rd MLR?
That's what I just mentioned. I think that they have to be mobile. They have to have the ability to pick up, to see things in front of them. And probably the hardest thing when you're seeing things, if you have a background in reconnaissance or surveillance, a lot of times you can detect things, Eileen, but making sense of it, what does that mean, is a different story. So we have to improve not just our ability to collect, but our ability to make sense of what we see, what we are detecting in front of us. And I think all that is things we will learn as we go.
Okay, let's shift to international. A Russian fighter jet collided with a U.S. Reaper drone over the Black Sea today. What is your response to that?
This is probably my biggest worry, both there and in the Pacific, is an aggressive Russia or China pilot or vessel captain or something gets too close, doesn't realize where they are, causes a collision, and it's 2 a.m, and we're trying to unpack this as fast as we can. I really worry about that. In other words, either intentionally or unintentionally, things bumping into each other, causing a collision, and then 2 great nations, powerful nations, trying to sort it out at 2 a.m. Even more challenging because right now, on our side, on let's say the PRC, normally we would have communications with the PLAN, their military. It doesn't exist right now. They won't communicate with us. So the normal sort of many channels that you have to kind of quickly diffuse something, they're gone. They're not gone, but they're suspended right now. So I worry that something will happen at 2 a.m, and we can't talk to our counterpart to say, what the heck was that about? So I worry, I do.
For Afghanistan, the House of Representatives is investigating the circumstances surrounding the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan in August 2021 and the suicide bomb attack outside Kabul airport that killed 13 Marines and nearly 180 Afghan civilians. Last week, U.S. Marine sniper Tyler Vargas Andrews, who was badly wounded in the attack, testified that he was not allowed to take out the bomber when spotted and that no one was held accountable for the deaths of his fellow Marines and the Afghan people. Please give us your assessment of what went wrong and how the withdrawal could have been done better. And then, do you feel that the way the withdrawal happened from Afghanistan affected morale and recruiting?
Maybe I'll offer a couple thoughts. First, just to round out the first part, there was also a soldier and a corpsman killed. The bulk of them were Marines, but there was also a soldier and a corpsman killed. And losing you all's sons and daughters, there's nothing more gut-wrenching than that, without a doubt. Here's what I'd say. There was compressed time, not much time to prepare for that evacuation once the decision was made. Thank goodness there were two different Marine units in the area, one aboard ship and one ashore. They were the first forces to HKIA Airport. Why does that matter? Because this is exactly what Marines do best. Go into a very chaotic, uncertain situation, sort it out, which they did. Here's how I would portray it. I'm not here to judge the strategic decisions, and actually the tactical decisions at the airfield, the airport itself, were made in Tampa and on the ground in Afghanistan. So I'm not here to judge that. But you should be sure, you should be confident. The Marines who were there in those two elements that quickly got there, I am confident there's no way all those thousands of people would have gotten out of Afghanistan if you didn't have your Marines on the ground. Very disciplined, making great decisions, corporals, sergeants, snipers. This is what we train for, and they shined. I'm asking you please to separate that from politics and strategy and bigger decisions at the Marine, soldier, sailor level. Extraordinary. Under the most duress, the most trying circumstances you can imagine, they made great decisions every day, 24 hours a day. And then they come home and we forget about it, right? They go back to their units or they get out and we don't think much of them. They knocked it out of the park. You would be so wicked proud of them. Separate that from all the rest, I would say. Hold up the individual soldier and sailor and Marine because they just are extraordinary.
Can we do anything as Americans to help uplift those Marines?
I think so, yeah. I think, the typical thing is you see somebody walking by or in an airport and they're wearing a uniform, you tell them thanks. And that always helps. It always does. Here's what else you can do. Just as a curiosity, how many folks in here either served in the military or somebody in your family served in the military? Yeah, look at this. To me, thank you. This is what you can do right there. I think, although there's studies in the past couple of years that says America's public trust in the military is going down, when you look deeper into those surveys, it's less a matter of trust. They just don't know their military. You are the connecting kind of tissue to the public. I'm asking you to tell your stories. Tell your husband, your daughter, or whoever served, your mom, tell their stories in your community. Because they're not being heard, and America just doesn't know their military. They're becoming less connected. That's a big worry for me. What can you do? In the communities, in the schools and churches and everywhere else, talk about service, whether that's in the military or any kind of service. Because right now, I think we could use a kind of rejuvenation of just public service, period. talk it up and use yourselves. It's hard because you all don't want to talk about, you don't want to brag about your service. We have to. Or you're going to walk right by people who don't even know anything about the military, and you are successful, right? And I'm guessing if I asked you, like, how'd you become where you are? You'd say, well, probably learned some of it in the military, and they gave me discipline and time management and all. I need you to voice that. I need to crank up the volume.
We have about 900 U.S. troops in Syria. Are those Marines, and what is the mission there?
Some of them are Marines. That's correct. And Syria is one of those areas in the world where left alone, if we were to pull out, everybody was to move out, it would become another Afghanistan, sort of a fertile ground for, that's where ISIS is right now, largely the biggest portion of them in jail. But if we pulled out and took our eye off of it, the concern is that would just regenerate itself all over again. So I think the strategy, as I see it, makes sense. Keep your thumb on that. Don't let it rebirth again.
Once China's maritime capabilities allow for operation below the threshold of armed conflict to gain first mover advantage, gain incremental positional advantage, what will the Marines do to overcome?
Okay, this sounds like somebody from National Defense University. I have no idea what they're saying. All right, and now I think I got it. Okay. That's cheating, whoever wrote that question. The sum total of that question, as I'm reading it, is the part of the strategy of the PRC, not the Chinese people, their government, is to take baby steps, very small steps that are largely unnoticed, and then take another half a step tomorrow, and then another half a step. You see this in places like the Spratly Islands, where their Coast Guard and militia vessels are lazing and trying to physically force the Philippine armed forces off of the Philippine sovereign territory, their own islands, or out of fishing areas in Japan, in the Senkaku, same thing. Using their less than military, but not really, it's basically paramilitary, their Coast Guard, their militia, to bully, to push out Japan and Philippines and all the rest of the countries. This, some people have called it, is it cabbage slicing, or what is it called? I can't remember. Salami slicing. Salami slicing, where you almost don't notice the little moves. We have to notice those little moves, because PRC and their strategy is the long game. They're not playing it for this week. They're playing the long game. We need to take the same approach. And they will be glad to move into your face a half a step and you to take a half a step back, because tomorrow they will take another half step forward. And you'll not even notice that you're moving backwards slowly. We need to understand this approach. Some people write about it as gray zone competition. But it's below shooting, but moving forward to accomplish their strategy and forcing you to take steps back. We gotta figure out, we gotta understand how to counter that. And I think a free and open press is the biggest part of that, actually. It's not military. It's making the world aware, frankly.
The Navy budget for fiscal year 2024 yesterday did not include any additional funding for amphibious warships, which the USMC frequently depend on for transportation to conflict zones. Do you think this omission is a mistake? If yes, how will you address this oversight?
I think the amphibious ships some people have described them as sort of the Swiss Army knife of the Navy. I think it's a pretty good metaphor. It is so unique. Probably most of you all have never been on an amphibious ship, but if you bear with me for 15 seconds, imagine a baby aircraft carrier that can launch jets or helicopters or tilt-rotor aircraft off of the flight deck. Below there is a well deck, and you flood the well deck, basically squat the ship down, and you can launch and recover manned or unmanned vessels out of the back of it at the same time you're launching and recovering aircraft. Nothing in the world is anywhere like it. And that's not the reason they're so valuable. It's because what that produces. That is your best chance to prevent a conflict. That is your best chance to respond quickly to a problem that's brewing. And it could be just an earthquake, not just an earthquake. It could be a typhoon or an earthquake or a natural disaster where one of our friends, one of our friendly countries needs help. That's how you do it. Because what you don't want to do is fly 3,000 soldiers or Marines ashore into a mess. No, go from ships. Don't become a burden ashore. But all of that depends on having enough amphibious ships where your Marines and sailors can be nearby when the problem happens. 31 is the bare minimum. We can't do with any less.
Before I ask the final question, let me take a moment to thank the organizers of today's events, headliners, co-team leaders Donna Line 1 and Lori Russo, today's headliner event coordinator Kevin Wensing, Club Events Coordinator Cecily Scott Martin, Club Membership Director Kate Helster, and Club Executive Director Bill McCarran. It's also my honor to present you, General, with the much coveted National Press Club mug. There you go. I had one more question, though.
If you could just leave the cookies on the table, I will put them in.
That's right. All right, last question. Austin Tice was a Marine Corps veteran.
Yes.
Who became a journalist and has been held prisoner in Syria for over 10 years now,
Yeah.
after being abducted while doing his job covering the impact of the war. What can you do as Commandant to influence the White House and State Department and others to help secure Austin's release and freedom? And then what would you say to him when we do welcome him home?
Whew, wow. I got to think about the last part. That's a hard one. The first part's I can answer pretty straightforward. Our job as Marines, if they can locate him and they can work out a plan, and I'm not the commander forward, but our job is to make sure we produce the forces that can do the job, and they can. So I have to make sure that I have Marines, if they're part of that force, who can go in there and get him back. We have a saying in the Marine Corps, we've had it for I don't know how long, that you were once a Marine, always a Marine. And we never, ever leave a Marine behind. You are a Marine for life, in other words. Austin Tice is a Marine. He's not a former Marine. Now, didn't used to be a Marine. He is a Marine. I can't, you know why. I can't comment on whatever discussions that as a nation we're having with Syria or other people. I'm not part of that discussion. But I can tell you most Marines know who Austin Tice is. You know, if they were given the opportunity, I mean, they would be in the back of an aircraft this afternoon to go get him, and they would definitely bring him back. We need to bring him back. I agree.